This is the Minnesota Youth Alive podcast, where we talk about empowering the church to reach students at their school and in their community. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us for this month's podcast. We have a very special guest with us, Dan Herod. You are a Youth Alive missionary to Wisconsin in northern Michigan, right?
That's right.
Also an author, and so it's great to have you with us today. We don't get a chance to really sit down and chat too much as Youth Alive missionaries state and things like that, but you do a lot of amazing things. Tell us a little bit, for all those listening in today, tell them a little bit, who is Dan Herod? What do you do? What are you passionate about in life?
Yeah, Kelly, thank you so much for this opportunity. It really is an honor, and for everyone joining us for this conversation, thanks for making the time. I am a 41-year-old husband, father, and I like to kind of start there because my family is a really big part of who I am.
Yeah.
And I'm just thankful because when you start life and you have dreams, you have goals, and then life happens and you're like, oh, I guess it's time to evaluate and maybe recalibrate and then adjust what I thought was going to happen. And when Marlena and I got married, we'll celebrate 20 years this
Wow,
this
congratulations.
August. We stood at that altar and we're like, man, this is going to be awesome. And it was. It really was awesome. And then life, it twists and turns. You have successes, you have setbacks, and you discover a ton about yourself.
Yeah.
But then you discover a ton about God. And so I've been serving as the Youth Alive missionary for Wisconsin and northern Michigan for 12 years.
Come on.
And there's a huge blessing to longevity.
Yeah.
Because the things that took me months of work 12 years ago takes me one email today. And there's that kind of just that flywheel principle. It starts off with a ton of energy, but the more you spin and you crank, and the momentum of your faithfulness generates trust from people that you're serving. It generates confidence in yourself. And it allows you to stay focused. And so on Wisconsin and northern Michigan's side of the border for Youth Alive, we share a similar heartbeat and passion that Minnesota Youth Alive has.
That's awesome.
Like you and Bobby and Richard Baker have been just tremendous friends to us in Wisconsin, and we've copied and pasted a lot that Minnesota does in Youth Alive, specifically with the school assembly side. And so we are cranking because we understand that students today need hope.
Yeah.
Anxiety is off the charts, depression off the charts, and loneliness.
Yeah.
And I don't think this will veer into a technology podcast.
Yeah.
But the smartphone is a reason why students are struggling. And technology is not bad, but only when you use it.
Yeah.
But where technology is at today, it's actually using us. And so with that said, I love life. I've never loved it more than I do right now.
That's amazing.
Because of what I'm learning, how God's growing me, who I get to do life with.
Yeah.
Like I tell people all the time, I love what I do, and I like who I get to work with.
That's amazing.
And it's pretty cool.
Yeah. I saw a quote the other day, work like you don't need the money.
Yeah.
And so, like, I was just thinking, like, do I work in such a way where I work like I don't need the money? I'm not there just to collect a paycheck, but I'm actually passionate about that. And so I would say that's so true about you. I've known you for just a few years now, and just to see your heart and your passion, it's not just from like a stage presence. It's not just when you're representing Youth Alive, but it's every single day of your life. And whether you wear something that says Youth Alive or someone just catches you in a phone call or something, your heart is so genuine. And so it's an honor to be here with you today. And so we've brought you in because maybe over the past couple of years, some of our students, youth pastors, youth leaders have seen people, or they themselves have been walking through a moment of crisis, a moment of grief. Maybe they've lost someone close to them. Maybe someone close to them is walking through something very difficult. And some people don't know this about you, but beyond being a Youth Alive missionary, you've wrote an amazing book called Suffer Well. And it's not an easy book, but it's a much needed book out there. And so can you just tell those listening what got you to write Suffer Well? Share a little bit of your story that you want to share with us today.
Yeah, I think one conversation we don't have enough of in the church is Christ followers. We don't talk enough about the totality of the gospel because we love the thought of the crown, but we forget that there's the cross.
Yeah.
And Jesus wore both.
Yeah.
And if we are going to follow Christ well, then we need to embrace the reality of both. And there's an element of following Jesus that I wanted to speak to because life for my family, and I know every family, has facets that are challenging and unique. But when someone asks me, like, how many kids do you have? That creates tension in my soul because I have 2 that live with us in our house, but I have 3 in my heart. And we've got Logan, he's 14. He's an amazing young man. At 14, he's like 5'9" already, and he's kind of going side eye on me. He's like, "Dad, I'm coming for you." And I'm like, "I have more money and I'm insured. What are you gonna do?" And then we've got Camden. She's 8, and I jokingly say she's 18 because she's just personality, joy. And just yesterday, I got to go on a field trip with her to the skating rink, and that was a blast. But in between Logan and Camden is Peyton. And when she was 13 months old, my wife laid her down for a nap, and she never woke up.
Wow.
And there's something called sudden infant death syndrome. And that's basically, and doctors have no answers. They don't know what causes it. But she passed away in her sleep, and that would have been 11 years ago this November. And we discovered a lot in that moment because we just started as Youth Alive missionaries. We were trying to raise support. We were believing that God was sending us into a new season that was going to be amazing, and it is. It's just not what we thought.
Yeah.
And so it would be probably 6 or 7 years after the passing of my daughter that I felt compelled to write Suffer Well, because we don't have enough productive conversations about pain.
Yeah.
And too often we throw what I call fortune cookie spirituality at people. And we often read it ourselves too. And one of them that rings false is this thought: God would never give you more than you could handle. And after Peyton passed away, people were saying that to us. And before she passed, I said that to people.
Yeah.
And then I discovered that's not true. There's a conversation that Jesus is having with his friends in the book of John. It's chapter 16, and it crescendos at verse 33. And before verse 33, he gives them all this really bad news. Like, it's going to be tough, guys. Buckle up, is what he tells his disciples.
Yeah.
And then he's like, but I've told you all of this so that in me you can have peace. In this life, you're going to have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. And we have to embrace all 3 layers of that statement from Christ, that when we follow Jesus, we're going to have peace. And it's going to go beyond our understanding. It's going to be powerful, but we're also going to have problems. And then we're also going to have power. And those 3 layers of what it means to follow Christ well, we have to take, if it's a sandwich, right?
Yep.
We have to take the whole sandwich.
That's good. Yeah.
We really do. And so I wrote Suffer Well to share our story. And I wrote it from an immense place of healing. Like, I was healing as I was writing. And I remember one chapter, I'm sitting here typing away, and I had a pretty emotional moment. And so I'm sitting on my lazy boy, my laptop's in my lap, and I am just doing the ugly cry.
Aww.
And my golden retriever's trying to jump up into my lap and console me. And I'm like, thank you. But I wrote it from this place of, we got to do this better.
Yeah.
We got to figure this out. And that's why I spoke to this, sharing our story. And it starts off with the toughest day of our life, losing our daughter, and then it culminates with the arrival of our youngest daughter, Camden. And it's a beautiful, painful journey, but that's what life is. And I think the sooner a student can embrace the fact that following Jesus will bring you peace, but it'll bring you problems, but it'll also give you power.
Yeah.
And it's that totality of the gospel that changes your life in two really good ways and one really, really bad way. It's going to complicate your life. If you follow Jesus well, your life is going to get complicated, but in the right ways.
I love how you talk about the sandwich concept and the different layers of it, because I think sometimes in Christianity, when you say we throw out the fortune cookie phrases, we're taking just a little piece of that sandwich. And then when we get the rest of it, we're like, wait, this doesn't line up. This doesn't look like what people told me it was going to look like when I ran into a hard moment. And so just kind of sharing, I don't know what you're okay with sharing today with us, but what were some of your emotions and things you walk through, your feelings you walk through when you experienced this death of your daughter? What are some things that hit you that maybe weren't expected?
Right. I think it's a whirlwind. And I think if you can picture an explosion, just a detonation in your life, and at first, there's just the concussion. It sends your life every direction. And then once the dust settles and you find yourself on your back and you're like, oh my gosh, what just happened? And your ears are ringing and you're stunned. And then you sit up and then you look around and you're like, oh my gosh, what just happened? And so I was really, really shocked, because I had this expectation of when I followed Jesus, this isn't supposed to happen.
Yeah.
And that's because I had a theology or a belief about God that wasn't rooted in the Bible. And that's where a lot of fortune cookie spirituality exists. It's all of these phrases, like the phrase cleanliness is next to godliness. That's a really good principle, but it's not in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
But the thought of God would never give you more than you can handle, that's not in the Bible either. In fact, I was just reading in the Psalms this morning and how, the Lord is our strength and our refuge. He's a present help in a time of trouble. And we love the strength and refuge, but then it's like, and a help in a time of trouble.
Yeah.
And we forget that, yes, God is our comfort, but we need to remember that if he's our comfort, we're going to need comforting. And so the grief journey, it is my understanding that there's 6 stages in the grief journey.
Yeah, explain those to us.
Well, if I had them memorized, I would. But I know for a fact, one of them is denial, another is anger, one is bargaining, and then there's acceptance, and then the 6th stage, and I know I only mentioned 5, but the 6th and final stage is assigning purpose.
Wow.
And I think that's Romans 8:28 to a T, where we understand that, and it says, we know that God causes all things to work together for the good of those who love him and those who are called according to his purpose. And N.T. Wright wrote a book called God in the Pandemic. And he released it in 2020. And his take on Romans 8:28 was really illuminating, because we read that verse and we're like, so God's going to cause everything to work together. I get to sit back and just wait for the package to arrive, like from an Amazon Prime truck. It's just going to show up. I wait, God works. But N.T. Wright pushes back on what I thought was the understanding, and he's like, no, it's a cooperative reality. God cooperates with us, and he works together with us for our good. Meaning, when pain hits our house and we're suffering, or loneliness shrouds our soul in agony, we have a responsibility. And it doesn't mean to say, suck it up, buttercup, slap a smile on your face and act like everything's okay. It's not what it says. In fact, there's a whole book in the Bible called Lamentations, which is just gut-wrenching prayers.
Yeah.
And so I love that about God. In fact, that's one thing that sets Christianity apart from every other major world religion that has ancient roots. Other religions, they would always tiptoe around their prayers. They wouldn't want to offend the deity. But if you read the Old Testament, you'll discover frank, honest prayers from God's people that other religions would consider rude. But it's somehow the Israelites knew that God was so close that he cared.
Wow.
And he wasn't pushed back by their honesty. He was drawn in by their honesty because he saw their hearts anyways. And so learning how to take responsibility for yourself in your journey is an absolute must. And in the book, I set it up this way. Your response is your responsibility. My response is my responsibility, and no one else is going to answer for my choices.
Yeah. So, man, you said so many good things. I'm just trying to remember all my questions I have for you. One thing you say my response is my responsibility. So what happens when your response seems very different than everyone else's response? Maybe other people seem to be moving through the grief process faster than you are, or you're able to process things a little bit easier. I think there's questions and doubts that come into people's minds of like, what's wrong with me? Right. Or did I not really care about this person? Right. Or, all those different things. How did you process through the grief process for you versus your wife or for someone else?
Yeah, I think if we can start with the idea that everybody is truly an individual, meaning everyone's response is going to be an individual response.
Yeah.
And so resist the temptation to compare and then to rank. Because the moment we start ranking people, we either place ourselves above other people or we place ourselves below other people, and both are wrong.
Yep.
If we can look in the mirror and accept this is who I am today, this is where I'm at right now, God loves me 100% as is. And that's what I love about the gospel. We receive it, we don't achieve it. We don't live for God's approval, we live in it. Like, we don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
This is a beautiful gift. And so if we can start there and resist the urge to compare and rank.
Yeah.
Because even Marlena, my wife, and myself, we grieved very differently.
Yeah.
Very differently. Marlena didn't get out of bed for 3 months.
Wow.
And I get it, because her relationship with Peyton was very different than mine. And she carried Peyton for those 9 months and just had a special relationship with our daughter that predated my introduction to Peyton. And then, but as a father, man, I was destroyed when Peyton passed away. And it took us a little bit to figure out we were very different. But Marlena just didn't want to breathe. And I get it.
Yeah.
I couldn't sit still. Like, my default setting was to medicate through work.
Yeah.
And so I became a workaholic.
Yeah. That's, people deal with grief so incredibly different. And I think that sometimes that's just a hard element to kind of process through. So another question I had from just what you've been saying is what was God's role? You've said some scripture of like, you're my help, you're my refuge. What do you feel like was God's role during this grieving process and walking away from, okay, this happened? I mean, then there's this other element of students and people who are like, why does God let bad things happen?
Right.
So, kind of talking about those two simple things. How do you walk through that?
Yeah.
And I don't even know if there's an answer for why do bad things happen and why does God allow those things? Yeah. But how do you process through that question that other people are asking and maybe you're asking now? And then what role is God playing through all of this and helping you walk through this moment?
What I've discovered God's role to be in my journey is to sustain me.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
I think I didn't realize how much I needed him until I didn't know what to do. And it was that humble confession of, God, I am just so lost right now. I am so confused. I am so angry. And I just don't know what to do. And so I found one of God's many abilities is to sustain me. There's a verse, and I forget the address, but it talks about Christ, and it says, in him we live and move and we have our being. And it's that inhale, exhale reality of God's present in every breath that I take, and every time I exhale, He's present. And that was new to me because I have an earn it mentality for my spirituality. There's a story of the prodigal son. It's very famous in church circles, and we always talk about it being a story about one lost son. It's actually a story about two. The younger son was lost in his pursuit of pleasure. The older son was lost in his self-righteousness.
Wow.
And that's me. Like 100%, man. I am way too good at trying to earn it. But you can't with the gospel. You can receive it, you can steward it, but you can't earn it. And so I found God to be far more generous than I had previously understood.
Wow.
And then to your question of, like, why do bad things happen? Oh,
Yeah.
man.
Not the easy question, right?
But it's the question.
Yeah.
And I think a phrase, another piece of fortune cookie spirituality that we traffic in here is everything happens for a reason. Also not true, from my opinion, because it implies that God is pulling every string, that God is causing everything to happen. Like, if we study the scripture, He's able to, but what does He choose to do? He set creation into motion, but what did He give Adam and Eve in the book of Genesis? He gave them free will.
Yeah.
What does He give you and me? Free will. And so when bad things happen, it's not God causing everything to happen. And I think it's important for us to make room for that in our hearts.
Yeah.
Because if you've ever taken a child to the doctor for shots, right?
Yep.
You bring them into the exam room, and you're holding on to them,
Yep.
and they get the vaccination, and they feel betrayed by you.
Yeah.
They really do.
Yeah.
But you are actually keeping them together while someone else caused them pain. And I think that is important if we want to have a healthy spirituality, if we want a good relationship with God. It's important for us to make room for that reality.
Yeah. Well, that's a great picture and image that you just gave there, because I think the world and the messages we've gotten from even believers who have a really good intent sometimes give us a very skewed view of what God looks like in the midst of grief
Right.
and pain and the role He plays. And so I want to just speak to, for those out there listening that are maybe currently walking through something themselves, what are some signs that what they're walking through is unhealthy? The things they're experiencing, the maybe the thoughts that are coming to their mind, what are some unhealthy things that can happen when you process through grief?
Yeah, I think when you're in pain, your vision, it gets blurry and it's hard to see clearly. And so I think answering the question, who am I right now? Because it's easy to blur the lines between your pain and your personhood. And so if your thoughts are, man, I am, and you fill in the blank, I'm a failure, or I'm worthless, or I'm not worth being loved, and you just kind of populate the narrative in your mind with lies. If you can reflect and just sit still for a few moments and ask the question, who do I think I am? It'd be good to evaluate and reflect there. And then as far as people in unhealthy environments,
Yeah.
because sometimes a student is doing everything right, but the adults in their life are doing everything wrong. It's important to know that another person's decisions have no bearing on your dignity or worth or value.
That's good.
And so to students watching and listening today, trust your gut, because the Holy Spirit is active in you. You said yes to following Jesus, and the beautiful thing is that He advances the Holy Spirit from heaven into your very being, and He leads you, the Holy Spirit leads you into truth. And so trust the discernment of the Holy Spirit, and know that when someone mistreats you and you're in grief over that, it's tough. It's easier to say than to do, but understand that there's a difference between their actions
Yeah.
and your response, meaning they caused it, but it doesn't mean that you deserved it. They hurt you, but it doesn't mean it should have happened or, is fate. And so if you can create space between, okay, that's what they decided to do.
Yeah.
That's not on me. But what I do next is on me. And if you can center yourself on that level of responsibility that you have and I have for ourselves, that's a way to stay kind of dialed in and healthy.
Yep. So if you're sitting here, if they're listening in and they know someone that's walking through grief, what would be something that they can do as a person who maybe isn't in the midst of it 100%, but as one step out? How do you help a person who is just walking through a deep loss?
Yeah. I think if we turn to the book of Job in the Old Testament, we see how to do it right and how to do it very wrong. And what I mean is when Job first lost everything, family, health, wealth, he lost it all. His friends show up, and for a little bit, they do everything right. They sat down and they shut up. They brought their presence into his pain, and there's something very humanizing, and it reminds you of, okay, I'm not alone. I'm not my pain. I'm more than this moment. And so when loved ones fill your space, and they don't have answers, they don't need to fix it, but when they're just there with you, that's a good step. And as far as where they messed it up, it's when they started talking. I think there's a reason why God gave us 2 eyes, 2 ears, but only 1 mouth.
Yeah.
It's because we're supposed to look twice as intently, listen twice as carefully, and speak half as much.
Wow.
And so if we can listen and understand that silence is okay, and I know silence is like a death sentence for this generation, like we hate it, right?
Yeah.
But when you're trying to support someone, confess the fact that you don't have the answers. And the sooner you can relieve that burden from yourself, the better of a friend you're going to be. And if someone's like, why did this happen? Have enough courage to say, I don't know. And it's when we start reaching for like, I've got to find something. And so you pick up fortune cookie spirituality and like you recite it like, it sounds good, right? It'd be way better to confess with humility, I don't know.
Yeah. I think that the quiet is very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's a very uncomfortable place to be, is to just sit there in silence. But it's also the moments when God can speak the loudest and clearest to us. Yeah. And so I think just being in those moments of just sitting with someone, like you said, that is such a powerful thing, just to be there with them.
Right.
And I would say, I've walked through pain in my life, but definitely nothing compared to your situation. Even as I was driving here today, I was like, oh Lord, like, I don't know how you guys have walked through this in life. Like, I was like, I don't know how I would wake up the next day, like just knowing what you guys have walked through, and seeing just the power that you've walked through it, that God has given you guys, is such an amazing thing. And so just what you speak to is so powerful, because it's a hard situation to be in when you're walking through grief. Yeah. It's a very hard thing too, to see people around you that you love and care about walking through it. For youth pastors out there, that this is, I think more and more the students we deal with today, you do school assemblies, they're walking through things that previous generations haven't had to deal with.
That's right.
And so as a youth pastor out there, what do as a youth pastor, what do I do to prepare students for these moments? What do I do to speak into their life in those moments?
Yeah, I think modeling is everything. And so wisdom, it's caught, it's not taught. And so understand that as a youth pastor, you're reproducing who you are, whether you're trying or not. And so for every youth pastor listening, bring yourself back to center and reflect. If you're married, talk to your spouse. If you've got a friend group, ask them, how do you think I'm doing? And be vulnerable with the people you trust, so that you can have an honest picture of yourself, because that's being reproduced in your students. And so how to equip them, I think doing your best to cultivate healthy community week in, week out, because tragedy doesn't strike every day.
Yeah.
It doesn't. And the reason why Marlene and I are so healthy today in our marriage is because we've got great friends.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, his name is Dan. He's got a great name. And But we'll talk on the phone sometimes 2 to 5 times a week. Mm-hmm. And he's been my best friend for well over a decade.
Wow.
And he was my best friend before the loss happened, and then again just became an incredible friend in my loss. And so because of the disconnected nature of our current cultural moment, we're over-connected digitally and we're under-relationshipped. Like the very thing we need to be great, thriving, healthy human beings, we just don't get enough of. And so youth pastors, the more you can do to create healthy community in your youth ministries, it's like the water level rises, and like in the harbor, when the water level rises, every ship rises. There's health there.
Yeah.
And then when the storm comes, then if more individual students can be healthier because there's a healthier culture, then when one ship starts to go down, then there can be that communal response.
Yep.
Like, not on our watch. We're not going to let her go down. Mm-hmm. I know she's under the waves right now. We're going in after her, and we're going to do it in a wise way, because there is a sense of Superman or Wonder Woman heroism that we kind of have in our culture. We love to be the rescuer. But that's not our role when someone else is in pain.
Yeah.
Our role is to be a kind, compassionate sister or brother in the Lord to them.
That's good.
Because Jesus is already the rescuer.
Yeah.
He's already the hero. Mm-hmm. We don't need more heroes. We need more people to be like Jesus. And I think if a youth pastor can intentionally cultivate community in their week-to-week youth ministry, when the storm hits, there's going to be a better response across the board.
That's good. Yeah. That's amazing, because when the storm hits, because it does hit for everyone. And so one thing, when people say, okay, I walked through this really hard situation, and maybe there's this thought of like, okay, God will pull you out of it and then you're good. That's not exactly what happened for you guys in your scenario. It wasn't just like one thing. It was like a storm after a storm after a storm. Would you be willing to share just a little glimpse into what that looked like for you guys?
Yeah, I think if we could understand there's 4 types of pain that we're going to go through. There's temporary pain, like it starts and it stops. And I resonate with that because 11 years ago, almost 12 now, I got Bell's palsy, which is basically where half my face stopped working. I was paralyzed. So everybody watching on the YouTube, like, you're getting my palsy side. I hope it's great. But that was a pretty rough 5 months. It started and it stopped. It was temporary. And so, but just because it's temporary doesn't mean it's easy. It's just temporary. And then another type of pain is sustained, where what happened changes the rest of your life, and you've got to walk with this now.
Yeah.
And for us, my wife battles chronic migraine headaches.
Wow.
And I jokingly say they started after she married me, but it's true. And we're working through that. And she's just this amazing woman who carries this burden, this challenge. And so in a typical month, she'll be in bed 20 to 25 days a month.
That's crazy.
And for every listener who sells essential oils, we know what they are, and we've tried them. And so the reality is that this is a sustained season. Mm-hmm. We're going to be carrying this reality indefinitely. And then another type of pain and grief is actually secret. And those are the individuals watching and listening right now that you're battling an addiction. Or maybe you're wrestling with depression and significant mental health realities, but you feel alone. And that type of pain is absolutely difficult, because when you feel isolated in your pain, it amplifies the agony, because it goes straight to the core of your identity. And then the fourth and final pain you and I will experience in this life is a tragic. Mm-hmm. And that's the loss of a loved one. Somebody that you never wanted to do life without is now gone. Mm-hmm. And so if we can truly understand that we're called to the finish line, which is a long ways away from here, and I think setting ourselves up for a good, durable effort instead of doing sprints is wise, and will get you to the finish line.
Yeah, one thing you said was you talked about a secret pain that people walk through. And I think that we have in our mind that it's very evident when people are in pain. And what we've learned more and more and more, and even in our season right now, is that no matter whether you're a student or youth pastor, there are people that are walking in pain that you walk by every single day. You think life looks great for them, but they're walking through something very, very difficult.
Yes.
And so, just to realize if you're listening in and you're not walking through something super difficult right now, or you're not walking through a current tragedy, a loss, the different things you mentioned, there could be people around you that you don't even realize the struggle they're in,
Exactly.
the mountains they're facing. And so this is where I want to bring it home with you really quick is if we look at a Youth Alive missionary, you do school assemblies, bring a message of hope. How has this whole, what you guys have walked through in life, how has that impacted you as a Youth Alive missionary in what you do?
Yeah, I think it's given me a greater passion for what I do because you learn what matters most in seasons of loss.
Yeah.
And the pile of things that I thought was important before Peyton passed away, it fell over. It just fell over. And I was like, wow, not a whole lot of this really matters. But I was giving my life to get more status, to have more success, and to have more stuff. And those 3 S's vex us because they're, with God, they're amazing. But if they are God, they're awful.
Yeah.
And so that loss, losing my daughter, snapped me into a focus. Once I emerged from my stunned state, it snapped me into focus of like, tomorrow's no guarantee. And so I'm waking up most mornings with a sense of urgency. Like this day matters because when your 13-month-old daughter, and the part of the story that I didn't share, but I'll share now is my daughter was at her doctor 5 hours before she passed.
Wow.
For her well child visit. Peyton's pediatrician looked Marlena right in the eyes and said, your daughter's perfect. And then 5 hours later, she slipped through the veil of eternity. 5 hours. And it's not a fear. I don't live with fear.
Yeah.
But it's this conviction that tomorrow's not guaranteed. And so what am I doing today that matters? And I think that driving thought enhances the good moments, the silly times, the laughter, the fun with friends, and it with Youth Alive, that powers me to drive the 4 hours in between communities after an evening outreach, and we've got miles to go. That's the driving force. And then when we are in a gymnasium or an auditorium, and one of the speakers is just bringing hope, I'm seeing hundreds of sets of eyes, and these are students whose families may be going through far worse than I've endured. And so that's the beauty of that cooperative relationship that God invites me into as far as the redemption of our story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Man, Dan, your testimony is so powerful, and I hope you understand that there are so many students who will be listening to this. There's adults who will be listening to this, and it'll impact their life in so many ways of working through something that they're stuck in the middle of, and they feel just lost and hopeless, and knowing that there's someone else who's gotten through something very difficult brings so much hope to other people. And so we're so excited to have you here. Really quick before we wrap up, because we could talk for hours with you. You have so much wisdom and such good words, and you phrase things so well. But we just want our listeners to just get a glimpse of who you are. We have like 3-4 questions for you really quick. I'll fire them off. First one is this. In your free time, what do you love to do for your hobbies?
I'm a volunteer firefighter.
Man, okay.
I absolutely love being a firefighter. I have over a decade of experience, and just recently I was promoted to lieutenant.
Wow.
And so if you've seen Forrest Gump, Lieutenant Dan, like it's pretty great. And so
this is good.
I find so much life and joy in serving alongside of men and women in our community. When the pager goes off, run down to the station, get in a fire truck, and go help people.
Man, you just have that adrenaline too, don't you?
After all the years of doing it, my heart still thumps when I hear that there's a fire somewhere. I'm like, let's go.
Wow. Okay, another one I have for you real quick is, what is God teaching to you right now in this season of life?
Yeah, I think the past 18 months, the gospel has renovated me down to the core of who I am. And God's been really working on the relationship that I have with me. And I didn't really like who I was for the longest time. And now that I'm in my 40s, I'm discovering some pretty unhealthy thought patterns that I cultivated from early on. But the beauty of the gospel is that it really allows you and I to retrain our thought processes in healthier ways. And so now I'm discovering, like, I like who I am. And I don't want to, like, flash back to a Saturday Night Live skit from decades ago. Like, there's this guy named, I think his name is Stuart, and he looks in the mirror at the beginning of an episode. He goes, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh, Gertie, everybody likes me. Like, I don't say that every morning, but I do look in the mirror, and I genuinely like who God's created me to be.
Wow.
And that is way different than the previous 4 decades of my life. And I'm so thankful for that.
Thank you for sharing that. As like a 40-year-old, I don't think people think you figure it out way younger in life. But it's something.
I wish. And some people do.
Yes. But it is a process every single day. Okay, last one I have for you is this. As a Youth Alive missionary, what's one of your favorite moments that you've been able to experience and just seen God move?
School assemblies during the day. And it happens everywhere we go. The speaker is communicating a specific message for the room, and you feel it, and you're like, oh, wow. And you'll hear gentle weeping, from sections across the gymnasium or the auditorium. And when you know that hope has met a heart in the room, that never gets old. And I can't wait to see more of it happen.
That's awesome. Great. Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining us. Your time is valuable, and so we appreciate you crossing the border into Minnesota.
Totally
coming
worth it.
and spend some time with us, and do it more often because
Absolutely.
you are more than welcome here in this state, and we are cheering you on in northern Michigan and Wisconsin and what God's doing there. So thanks for joining us. Students, leaders, adults, we hope that this podcast just touched a part of your heart for those who are just walking through something difficult or you have someone around you. So thank you so much for joining us for this podcast. Next month is camp, and so we're excited to be joining you at Lake Geneva for student leadership trainings in the morning sessions. And so we're excited to be there. You guys have camp coming up too.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
So it's going to be a great time. We love our summers as Youth Alive
right,
missionaries. Thanks, guys, so much. Have a great day.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Minnesota Youth Alive podcast. Remember, you can download the Minnesota Youth Alive app and check us out on Instagram and Facebook for updates and information.